Here at Lake Grove Presbyterian Church, we recognize the complexity of this season and are inviting all of us to reflect on our experience of this complicated and uncertain time.
Welcome to Caring Conversations. Hi, Susan. Good to see you today.
Hi, Lillian.
So I am so excited about this topic that you're bringing to us today because I think it's the perfect timing. Now, for our listeners, I want to invite you to imagine it's Sunday morning and you haven't gone to in-person worship for months, maybe even the full 14 months. It's been over a year, but you decide, this Sunday, I'm just really excited to be in person. And if you are a member of our church, then you've registered beforehand. And so that anticipation builds. Oh, I'm going to be back in our sanctuary. I'll be able to drive into the parking lot and walk down the hall under our breezeway, get into the sanctuary, and just experience worship with my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. And you get there, and things are a little bit different. Actually, they're pretty different. Yeah. And you, with all of the cautionary and necessary means that we have implemented just as we are emerging into in-person worship, sometimes the worship experience feels strange and just it's not the way it used to be. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Susan, to help us walk through this strange feeling.
Thank you, Lillian. And I think you described it so well for us, right? So many of us have been looking forward to what we used to consider one of the most meaningful moments of our week, gathering together at 9:30 and we know 11 or 5 but you get it, gathering together to worship in person with your fellow congregants. And being able to listen to beautiful music, hear a message that helps anchor you in the hope of God and encourage you for the week ahead, it just kind of gave you an anchor. And so what do we do when that just simply does not feel that way anymore? Frankly, it can feel discouraging and disappointing. And I have heard myself even say, and being a pastor who leads services like this, right? Oh Lord, how are you meeting us now? This practice that we have had, that we have formed ourselves around, and actually you could think we have formed ourselves around this even before you and I were ever a part of the specific congregations we are, right? We as a people have been doing this for generations. What happens when we don't really feel it anymore? And so I want to say that because that is a feeling word, and we can have a lot of responses to, oh goodness, this isn't something that you just feel. You do it because it's a responsibility and important to do. But let's just acknowledge for a moment when something doesn't feel like it gives the meaning that it once did. How do we handle that?
Mm-hmm.
Lillian, have you experienced that? And I want to actually invite all of us to reflect even further back a little bit in our experience. Have you ever had something very meaningful to you, a spiritual practice that for whatever reason at one point it no longer met you?
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced that, Lillian?
Oh, I think I felt that unfortunately multiple times in my life. The one that comes to mind is journaling.
Yes.
I took up journaling from a very young age, and I think I was about 8 years old, and I loved it. My parents loved gifting me. Like that was the perfect gift for Christmas or birthdays. And so I have, I have a box full of my old journals, and they're, whether they would go from diary to journal to prayer journals to sermon notes. I kind of kept everything in one place. And it was a very meaningful practice. I mean, so much so that I kept them.
Right.
But I want to say probably a decade ago, journaling became very difficult to do and was not life-giving. It became oh gosh, I better sit down and write in my journal. I better journal to God. And it did feel disorienting,
Yeah.
and it felt strange not having that practice breathe life into me the way it did. So then there was a lull. Well, if it's not journaling, then what is there? And
Mhm.
then there's that gap.
Right. And I think we're in the gap
Mhm.
right now, which is actually an invitation and an opportunity to listen deeper. Where is the voice of God? How do we hear the voice of God right now? So I was thinking, as we're living in such mixed times, right? Disappointment, discouragement, as well as hope, stepping more towards even a little bit of joy and encouragement and excitement. It is kind of wild to feel all of these things, and innocence and ambivalence, where you actually, it's not a not caring, but it's caring deeply about forces that seem to have um, that can't coexist at the same time, right? They're pressing, you care about them so deeply, they're pressing against one another. And it feels like that a bit with this.
Mhm.
And then, so being stuck in that gap, what do we do? I think I want to pull a few moments to talk about maybe some things we have tried. And so I'll speak just for myself. Oh, well, I'm going to try the same thing, but harder.
Yes.
Meaning I
Right.
will really give it my all. So to use your example, like the journaling, okay, maybe I'll ask myself to do it twice a day instead of
Mhm.
just once.
Mhm.
Or in worship, no, I'll just keep going. I'll just keep doing this. And it really ends up being unproductive.
Right.
And so I'm going to say something that might sound kind of wild and like, are you serious? But I'm hoping it's very freedom giving. And that is, if something isn't working, you are free to let it go.
Mhm.
Now, that doesn't mean let go of all of your spiritual practices, let go of what is so meaningful to you. What I'm saying is the form that you're trying to make happen, let it go.
Mm.
And the invitation then is to lean into, okay, God, where do I see you? In the Gospel of John, and it's chapter 10, verse 10, it's really powerful. Jesus is talking, and he's talking to his disciples and says, you know, the thief, our adversary, only comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that you may have life and have it to the full. And in that, I think we get an invitation of, okay, Lord, you have come that we may have life, like actual nurturing, life giving, like food that's actually healthy for us, exercise that makes our bodies move, actual generative, life giving life. So lean in for what is that right now for you, which may invite you to really pay attention, slow yourself down. So, this, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, the prayer of examine,
Mhm.
where you lean into your day, give yourselves a few moments to pay attention, ask yourself a few questions. I'm going to give you a couple examples, and then Lillian, I'd love to hear your responses or thoughts about it. Kind of a big general question is, where did I feel the most life today? And then the other question is, where did I feel things were life draining? It just felt like drudgery. And just making a note of that. But Lillian, as you hear those questions, are those helpful to you? Or have you thought of other ways to ask those similar types of things?
Mm. Yeah, I think those two questions are extremely helpful. What in my day has given me life, and what in my day has been life draining? Um, I do think sometimes in the excuse that we use of the busyness of the day, it is hard for us to even remember, like, what happened today? What did I eat for lunch? I don't even remember. And so, in some ways, the prayer of examine can help us be more intentional about our days. But for those of us, and I include myself, who sometimes feel like we can't even do that, um, it's something that I've taken up over the past year is the breath prayers. Like, just
Mhm.
those moments to notice, like, just pause and notice, and how's my body feeling? What am I thinking? Where is my heart? And just a breath prayer, short breath prayer. Hallelujah, Lord. Or have mercy, God, depending on what the situation is. And so being able to just be in the present has been helpful for me.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciate from what you're sharing with us today is that, yeah, sometimes we can let go of what
Mhm.
is no longer giving us life. And it's sort of like, as we're children, we love to eat certain things. And the older we get, we're like, well, that doesn't taste as good anymore. How our tastes change. So I see that similar with our spiritual journey. There are moments in our lives where a certain practice, a certain spiritual discipline can really fill us. And then maybe it's time to move on. And so maybe this is an occasion, this time.
Mhm.
2021 is another opportunity for us to think about that and not just hold on to what used to work.
Right. I think that's exactly it. You mentioned a phrase just a moment ago of saying what helped you be in the present. And that's the gift of it, because when I am feeling that disappointment and discouragement, I'm really wishing I was in the past or hoping I'm someplace else. And so leaning in, and I'm not saying that, oh boy, and then it's suddenly going to be all is well. We feel the journey of faith has pain moments and great hope moments. We feel both of these things. And I think they're necessary, right? It is a part of life. But it really is an invitation to say, okay, Lord, how are you inviting me to meet you now? And another important point is, how are you inviting us, Lord, to meet you now as a congregation? Because yes, while I'm saying if something isn't working, feel free to drop it. I'm asking you to, what else can you put there? So it might not be, okay, don't ever come to church again because it's not like how you remember that. That would be taking it a little far. I would say, let yourself reflect with the Lord of what is bringing meaning in that. Sometimes when it's hard to answer the question, or it feels too big even to be like, what's most life-giving in my day? Gracious, like you were talking about, what even happened today? Um, Maybe pay attention to those moments, to just different feelings. How do you feel like if you were to write a list down from your day? And it can be real truth telling. Oh, I went from feeling apathetic to hopeful to discouraged to angry to irritated. And if you haven't noticed, there were about 4 words right there that I just said that all stemmed from irritation, anger, frustration. Those are important points to pay attention to. Something is meaningful under there that's not getting met.
Mhm.
And so there, let's offer that to God and say, how could I see you meeting me, God, in the midst of that?
Yeah. And what are you replacing? Um, what are you, God, replacing to fill this gap? And so, yes, absolutely. We're not saying, just walk away from it all. But remember, God is at the center and He is calling, and
Yes.
He is beckoning and welcoming us to come to a different level. And
Yeah.
so you're right. We started with church. If it feels strange, that doesn't mean don't ever go back. But what is the Lord inviting you to in worship, given these circumstances?
Mhm.
He is ever present. And so what does that mean then for
Yeah.
us to engage with Him?
Yes. I love those words you added in, because this is the reality of where we are. God, given these circumstances, how are you calling? How am I showing up? And so, our invitation this morning to all of you is, let yourself see how you may get to show up in a different way. And there are a lot of beautiful spiritual practices. And I want to, if those seem muddy at all, or like, well, goodness, what is that? Is it a special list? Do you know spiritual practices are those things that help us pay attention to God? So it can be the spiritual practice of laying the breakfast out on the table and having Lord, I see how you have provided for me. Your mercies are new again every morning, right? We don't have to be precious about it or that it is in churchy language, but how are we turning our attention to God? And I would encourage in our own life with God and in our life with one another, because we are on this journey together. Um, so I'm just hoping that we, in the opportunity to name, hey, this is weird, we can invite some new ways to be together. Um, and I know anyone, as you are listening, we're so thankful for you coming along with us in this. But if you'd like to talk about it more and how you sense a shift in your spiritual life, which is your whole life, the ways you are encountering and meeting God, we'd love to connect with you.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Susan, for bringing this to us and helping us just name this is weird, and that invitation to lean into where the Lord is welcoming and inviting us to what is a deeper level. So thank you, and thank you all for those of you who are listening. Until next time, take care. Bye.